Hello everybody and welcome back to the Little Quilter. Today we are getting the backing for the little bird quilt, this quilt down here on the floor. So we're getting the backing onto the frame today, and I just wanted to show you guys what that backing looked like. I really like it. The navy is just a bit off from the actual quilt itself, so the colors are a bit off, but because one's going to be on the front, one on the back, not that worried by it. And I don't plan on using this background or the backing fabric as a binding. I've got a binding separate for this, so I think it will be just fine. So without further ado, I'm going to get this onto my quilt. Alright, now we have got the quilt backing on, the batting, and we've got the quilt top on here. And alright everybody, so we've got the quilt loaded back here, and what I'm going to be doing is the background. So kind of like I did with the legendary quilt, what I've decided to do is just the background first, and primarily that's because I'm going to do different colors for the birds. So my original thought was to use a silver colored thread and do that for the background, but when I laid the silver threads, even like a dark gray or a light gray, it just really popped on the blue navy background. And so I decided it was just going to be too much. My hope had been it would kind of blend and sort of take on that darker color as I quilted it, but I'm just concerned that it's just going to be a really like luminescent background. And for me, the background is not what I want to focus on in this quilt. For the legendary quilt, I was fine with that background popping a little bit because I wanted that background to pop, but for this one, I'm doing just a straight line quilting, and I don't want it to really pop. I want it to just kind of give a little bit of texture to the background, but then I want the main focus to be the birds. So I've gone with this navy glide thread, and I've got a bobbin that is the same color as this. So that's what my plan is. And then probably going to go back through with a light gray to do the birds, because red, that light green, and blue, just there's not really another color that I feel like mixes well with that. So I'm going to get going on this and we'll see how it starts. Alright everybody, so I have got this sort of started. I've gone around the edges of the quilt, and I've actually gone around the border as well. And I was going to start quilting the border when I kind of realized that I hadn't really designed a border, so I had to kind of stop everything and rethink how I was going to do that. I have decided on a border. There's a part of me that's really set on it, and another part of me that's just not sure. The other thing that's interesting about this quilt is that the lengths of the border are different. So you have this quilt top right here, which is a different length than technically this border. Okay, so I'll show you a little bit better. So you have this quilt top, which I've gone through and quilted along the edge as well. And then you have this continuation of the border. Now, there's kind of like this faux border where the bird's beak is sort of sticking into it. But, I feel like as it goes, I can't remember how that goes. Well, let's see, we've got it over here. Yeah, so you can see here on this side where we have a tail feather coming in, you really end up with just this short little border right here because the tail feather comes in here, and so this becomes more background. So that definitely makes it a little bit interesting because whatever you quilt up here is going to be sort of miniaturized down here. You could try and say, well, my border extends to here, so you have the same size, but then you're going to have to contend with bumping into part of the actual quilt block. So I've definitely done quilt where the background extends into the border. The Kite in a Square quilt was a great design for that, but in this quilt, I don't really want to do that. I've decided that since I'm going to do a really simple background design, I am going to echo that pattern onto the border design. I'm just going to do it a lot smaller or a little bit more condensed. I thought about doing some designs that would kind of be like more of a frame. I always have this idea that the border is like a picture frame, and so you can have this really ornate picture frame, or you can have a really simple picture frame. I'm hoping that this works out. I think it will, and I think it goes with the design. I'm just not sure because it's hard for me to draw it out on my iPad in a way that makes it look good, and I'm not going to take this off and redo a picture now. So we'll see how this turns out. All right, so I've got a bit of a decision to make with the border here in that well, let me show you. It'll be easier. Okay, so I have got my needle down here. I'm not sure if I'm going to start here or not, but I started with this and was doing each piece as I went, and then decided that it might be easier to just go through and do all of the zigzag lines and come back through. And just as a heads up, I have been using this line right here. I don't know if there's even like a mark. I don't think there's a degree line, but I've just been using this front line here to basically decide where to do my diagonal line. Now, as we came down here, basically we ended up with a line like this. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just go backwards, and this is the way that the pattern is moving. If we look over here, so you can see here, this is that same pattern. But then I thought, well, is that going to work, honestly? So, and the main reason I wonder that is because if I follow that pattern with these going, you know, horizontally in this direction, then we're going to get here, and I feel like it's going to need to change. And then this will go this way, and this will need to go this way. So I'm probably going to unpick all of this, these lines right here, I believe, and continue around in that direction. I'll have to look. So if I look over here, I might be okay. So, no, I might have to take these out too here. These first ones, extend this out. Well, no, actually I might be okay here in this instance because I went ahead and cut this off before the corner. So I can just line up and keep going in that direction. Not sure how this is going to end up at the end of the quilt. We might end up with a bit of a overlap, but maybe, you know, if you think of this as like this, everything has to start somewhere. So I think that'll be okay though. And again, this is just the border design. Now, it is pretty tightly done. So I think these are like a 1/2 inch. So if we get this right here, lining it up, so each line is 1/4 inch. So when I do that, that's a 1/2 inch. So doing 1/2 inch lines, which does make it a pretty close together design, but I do like it. And also I'm thinking, so I was going to start here, but I think in order to ensure my lines are even with this part, I need to actually go backwards, which is, well, that's why I wanted to start down there, but I've got to think through it and make sure that it's going to work. So I may just run, I may just run down here so that I don't have to pick up my stitch, because I've already set my stitches, and just start here. Well, I think I'll just cut my stitches and start. Yeah. All right, I've gone through and took out all of the stitches. You can see here where I pulled all those stitches, and then went back through and went the opposite direction. There's a part of me that really likes this cross hatching, but that would be a little bit intense for a border, I think. So we won't be doing that. We'll continue along with our diagonal lines. And then you can see here, I think that this works a lot better. It's just a transition of having this line continue and just continuing that same pattern before moving on to this. Almost makes it look like there's a hidden like square, like there's a little block here that's being put on there. So that's kind of a neat design pattern there. So I can go all the way down and do this line, and then I can come back and I can do the top line without having to break my thread or just do a lot of overlapping back and forth running, right? Because if I go, in order to stay in line, I have to come down, go this way, and then if I was going in this direction, I'd go to the right and go all the way down, do it again. So this way I can just quilt directly to the left, do the next line directly to the left, and then so on and so forth for the right side. So I think that's going to be a lot easier to do. Now, as much as I'm loving doing this quilting, I'm going to have to take a break and go to bed because it's starting to get late, and I'll have to pick up on this again, but having a lot of fun with it. So I can't wait to see some more, and until next time.